Today, the month of May kicks off with a major Bitcoin pullback. Federal prosecutors reportedly questioned payment processor Block's former employees about its compliance practices, and Liz Lopatto of The Verge breaks down what it was like in the courtroom when Changpeng Zhao was sentenced to 4 months in prison. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Talia Kaplan. Cryptocurrencies are firmly in the red to kick off the new month. By noon Eastern, Bitcoin tumbled 6%, adding to yesterday's losses. The cryptocurrency fell as low as $56,500, the lowest level since February 27th. Meanwhile, Ether's also moving lower this morning, falling 3.6% and below $2,900. Solana dropped 3.5% to $123. Okay, let's talk about the top stories. Federal prosecutors are reportedly digging into the internal practices at payments giant Block, the parent company of Cash App and Square. According to NBC News, former employees claimed to prosecutors in the Southern District of New York that Block participated in widespread and years-long compliance lapses. NBC News reports that a former employee provided documents that allegedly show insufficient information collected from Square and Cash App customers to assess their risk, and that Square allegedly processed transactions involving countries under sanctions. Most of those transactions reportedly discussed, which included credit cards, dollar transfers, and Bitcoin, were allegedly not reported to the government as required. The Southern District of New York declined to comment on this story. We also reached out to Block, but didn't hear back yet. Next, the Department of Justice is accusing a crypto influencer and early Bitcoin adopter of evading nearly $50 million in taxes. The DOJ unsealed the indictment yesterday, charging Roger Ver, also known as Bitcoin Jesus, with mail fraud, tax evasion, and filing false tax returns. The DOJ alleges that he gave up his U.S. citizenship in 2014 and provided false information to a law firm helping with his expatriation process by undervaluing the Bitcoin holdings belonging to him and his companies. Prosecutors also claim he sold tens of thousands of Bitcoin in 2017 for around $240 million, which he was required to report and pay taxes on, but hid from his accountant. Ver was arrested in Spain over the weekend, and the U.S. plans to extradite him for his trial. We reached out to Ver but didn't hear back right away. Finally, Binance's ex-CEO Changpeng Zhao has been sentenced to 4 months in prison for money laundering violations. That sentence, handed down from a federal judge in Washington, is less than the 3 years prosecutors were pushing for and less than the sentencing guidelines of 12 to 18 months. In remarks to the court, Zhao reportedly struck an apologetic note and said that he failed to implement an adequate anti-money laundering program and that he recognized the seriousness of his mistake. Now, this shortened prison sentence comes after CZ struck a deal with U.S. prosecutors to resolve a multi-year investigation into Binance. In that deal, Zhao agreed to step down and pay a $50 million fine, while Binance itself paid $4.3 billion. In a statement to CNBC, a Binance spokesperson said that the exchange is proud of the culture of compliance, security, and transparency over the past several years, and we look forward to building on that culture as we continue to evolve. They added that the company had made considerable compliance enhancements. Meanwhile, Zhao posted on X last night that he would do his time, conclude this phase, and focus on the next chapter of his life, which he says is education. All right, let's keep talking about CZ for our main story. Crypto World's Jordan Smith spoke with Liz Lopatto, senior reporter at The Verge, who was in the courtroom during Zhao's sentencing. She breaks down that prison sentence and how it stacks up against the last court case we spoke to her about, Sam Bankman-Fried's.
Liz, welcome back. This is the second time you've been on the show, first for the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried and now for the sentencing of Changpeng Zhao. Both times you were in the courtroom, but these were very, very different environments. And what was it like sitting in the courtroom for this hearing, and how did the judge sort of approach the sentencing of 4 months for CZ? And let me know whether you think that the sentence, which was below the guidelines, was what you were expecting.
So first of all, I'm here in Seattle. And so there was much less of a scrum of people trying to get into the courtroom. So that was a big difference. It was just much less of a crowd. And in some ways it felt a little anticlimactic, right? Like there wasn't the same kind of, drama around this. There had been a plea deal. CZ had, made whatever deal he had made with the feds. And it was a very sort of different environment in that sense. And when it comes to the sentencing, listen, it's lenient enough that I'm really curious about a sealed matter that was referred to repeatedly in court. Because if you think about it and you think about all the things that were alleged in the complaint and all of the things that were alleged in like the CFTC lawsuit and the SEC lawsuit, all of which now settled, it kind of seems like there was a lot of evidence for a lot of stuff. And yet we have CZ pleading to only one charge. And it's a charge that doesn't carry a lot of time. And he's getting sentenced for 4 months, which is less than the probation department's recommendation. So it makes me wonder what exactly he gave the feds, just to be blunt about it, whether it's just that, it's really they're able to better surveil whatever's going on in Binance, whether they have a record of transactions, all of that stuff. It seems like there's some piece of this that we're missing. And I know it has to do with cooperation because that was mentioned in open court.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because it seemed to come up time and time again throughout this hearing. And I was wondering if you had any sort of inkling as to what this might be, this matter that is under seal, or if we just don't know, and we may not know for some time.
We don't know. We may not know for some time. I can imagine that getting access to Binance would be really valuable for a whole alphabet soup of government agencies. It's also, there were reference to terrorist groups. There were reference to sanctioned countries. Those things can potentially be valuable. There may also be things that we haven't even thought about that are valuable, and then CZ, of course, is a really central figure in crypto, and Binance is a really central exchange in crypto. So it could quite literally be anything. But whatever it is, it's got to be relatively big for CZ to have gotten off this light. And I think maybe that's part of the reason we're in Seattle, because if you think about it, this is maybe an unusual jurisdiction to be pursuing this particular complaint. So I have a lot of questions about how we wound up here in the first place and what we don't know, that I think more so than I did when I walked into that courtroom.
I'm curious about the remarks that CZ gave in court. Talk about the tone that he took when giving those remarks, because he seemed pretty apologetic. He seemed to be remorseful, but did that translate in the room?
I would say so. He was very soft-spoken. And he was very attentive to whoever was speaking. When the judge was, reading out the sentence, he was nodding along. But there was a real sense in which he was trying to show that he had accepted that he had done crimes and that he was trying to repent. And that was like a real distinction from what I saw with Sam Bankman-Fried, who, he came in and gave a really bizarre statement about how he hoped somebody would build what he thought FTX could have been. And it sort of amounted to him saying something like, I would do this again, which the judge in that case also picked up on, and which I suspect influenced the sentence. So there was, I guess, a level of reality, I think, with CZ that we didn't see with SBF. Like, CZ understood what he was facing. He understood what he needed to do in order to try to get as light of a sentence as possible, and was willing to do it. There was just a level, it was watching somebody who's an accomplished businessman, like, finish off a deal that maybe isn't the best deal for him, but the best deal he's going to get under the circumstances.
Yeah, I think one of the things we heard time and time again during the SBF trial was that he's not doing himself any favors. Every time that he spoke, he was digging a deeper and deeper hole for him, whereas it didn't seem like that was the case with CZ. And I'm wondering, knowing what we heard from him in court yesterday, if that apologetic tone that he took helped ultimately lessen the sentence that he got, or if you think this was a situation of somebody who had a lot of money and really good lawyers helped work a deal that actually got him the 4 months, or if it was actually the tone that he took.
It's a good question. I think it was all of those things. I also think, the judge made reference to letters that he received, unsolicited letters about CZ. And he had like a little binder that he referenced having read, and said that had really influenced his judgment as well. And that his picture of CZ was relatively positive, and that he didn't think CZ was likely to reoffend, which again, that's a very distinct difference from what we saw with Sam Bankman-Fried, where there wasn't, this enormous binder of letters, and there wasn't the sense that, aside from a specific business decision that had been made, he had mostly been a good boy, right? Like, CZ made a business calculation, which was referenced in court, that it was better to ask forgiveness than permission. And that was something that the judge brought up as being part of the reason why he had assigned prison time, that like specific calculation, was not something he wanted to reward. But aside from that, he didn't see any problems with CZ, as a potential threat to the public, let's say, if he were allowed to be free again.
Yeah. There's something I want to go back to that you said back when we were talking about the SBF trial. You were making this point that time and time again in the crypto industry, people point to these cases and say, this is just one bad apple. This is something that's just off to the side. This isn't the industry as a whole. And you made a reference to somebody in the courtroom asking about Binance and whether everything was above board there. And then, now we see 6 months later where things stand with that. I'm wondering if you feel as though we're still in that sort of environment in the crypto space where, people are still have this mindset of, oh, it's just, one case off to the side, or if people are starting to feel like this is a more widespread problem that needs to be addressed. Where do we stand in that sentiment?
I think that there's still sort of a widespread denial of the lessons that we could have learned from, that particular cycle, because in some ways this sort of puts a cap on that particular bull run, right? Like, these were the two key players there. And I haven't seen any real change in the industry aside from the approval of some, Bitcoin ETFs. And I don't know that we're going to necessarily get people coming into the industry. I think the people who are already there are going to stay there and going to continue doing whatever they're doing. But if you are looking to bring in outsiders, there does need to be substantial change. I haven't seen really any of that kind of change occur. And so I think to some degree, these are just a couple of bad apples explanations are a way of resisting the kind of change that could potentially lead to, a different outcome. And so I sort of expect something like this to happen again.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today, but we'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.